Hello, as promised then, a quick update on the solar hot water system. It's been working well. In fact, it's the beginning of October as I film this, and it's still making a meaningful contribution to the hot water system, which is nice. I have some footage to show you of various experiments I was doing with it when I first installed it. It's the 7th of May. It's probably the hottest day of the year so far here. It's about 23 degrees in the shade. It's about 1 o'clock now, and today's experiment I've left the return line shut off so that these solar panels are isolated. It's, like I say, shut off inside there by the underfloor heating, but obviously open to the top, so the water in here can expand upwards, so it's still safe. Another hour, see if that gets any higher, and then I'll dump that heat into the hot water tank. Right now it's 2 o'clock, it's still all shut off. Let's see what we got. The most I'm seeing is 66. Doesn't seem to have got any hotter since 1 o'clock then, which is interesting. I'm going to open the circuit now and put that hot into the hot water tank where it belongs. Okay, I just put the return line open, so the heat is now free to migrate through the circuit. That's hot. 70, 74 again. So that shows the water in the panel there is hotter than what was being conducted along this pipe to the bit where I was measuring it. So now the water is flowing. We're seeing some very high temperatures. And of course all that water is now being replaced by cold water coming in at the bottom. So in a few minutes that will probably start to drop. So it's been open for a couple of minutes and we're already down to 44. Yeah, 44, something like that. If I leave it now, I expect it'll probably stay. Bloody hell. Alright, mate. Nope. Nope. The poor little cockerel's got mental. Right, I'm going to have to go and sort him out. I think he's got a bit of vine stuck down his leg and he thinks he's being chased by something. You right there? Right, that was I. Ooh. It's down to 37 now. I'm thinking it'd probably be in my benefit to partially close the valve in there, or even shut it off and let the heat build up again. There's no point looking at the tank temperature just yet because that heat will have gone into the heat exchanger and it'll take a while to work through the tank to get to the edge of the tank where the temperature sensor is, and I can tell if there's any, how much heat transfer there is. Anyway, interesting stuff. Trying something a bit different today. Instead of heating up the heat exchanger and thereby the hot water tank, I'm putting the heat into the floor instead. I'm currently running the pump at speed number 2, and that seems to be about appropriate at the moment. The return line is reading 18 degrees or so, and the flow line into the floor is just under 30, 29, something like that. That's about the right heat drop that I'm after. It's been running for about an hour now, and it seems that the panels are keeping up with that speed of pump. It all seems to be working quite nicely. So I'll let that run all day and see what happens to the temperature in the floor itself. It's nearly 5 o'clock, and what's interesting here is that we've only just started to dip off 30 degrees. Normally the panels are losing their heat by about 4 o'clock onwards, I'd say. It's now starting to dip away. The return line has gone up, so that was reading about 18 or so, that's 20. And yeah, like I say, the feed line has gone down to what we've got now, about 26. That was sitting at about 30 consistently for most of the day. Interestingly, the floor itself doesn't feel any warmer at all, which is slightly peculiar. Today's quite exciting, probably not the right word, but today's the first time that I've had these panels going and the immersion heater going for most of the day. I've not been in the workshop this morning, so I put the immersion heater on as soon as the batteries came up to charge, which is about 10 or 11 o'clock, that sort of time they went into the absorption phase. So stuck on that immersion heater, and obviously the panels have been going from whenever the sun started hitting them. We started the day with the hot water tank about 27 degrees. I've just checked it now and it's just a shade off 47. So that's really great. That's a 20 degree rise, well 20 degree leap in temperature over not even the course of the day, up until early afternoon. I'm expecting a couple more hours out of this. What I've had to do with the panels is almost shut them off, because the thermosyphon, despite the skepticism, the thermosyphon system is too efficient at removing the heat from the panels. What I've done is almost shut off the ball valve in there on the return line, and that's slowing the flow enough for the panels to get up to some proper hot temperatures before that heat migrates up into the heat exchanger. So we'll see how much more is to come. I'm probably going to turn off the immersion heater now because I need to do some work in the workshop. I'm going to need all the power I've got to run the giant angle grinder. But yeah, that's pretty much a hot tank of water without any effort on my part at all. And best of all, I haven't needed to light a fire on a sunny day, which is what I was doing last year, which always feels a bit odd. This is quite a fun use of both solar power systems. I'm using the solar electric obviously to run the carpet cleaner, clean the carpets. Then I use the hot water from the solar hot water panels and the pump powered by the solar electric to run the underfloor heating and dry off the carpets. So that's quite a nice feeling of having the entire thing solar powered. The smaller rugs I dragged outside onto the decking and washed them out there, and they can dry in the sun, which I suppose is, is another way of using solar power, a bit more directly. I did get round to insulating the hot water cylinder. That made a dramatic difference. I stripped off all the insulation that was there already, apart from the spray foam that's actually sprayed onto the cylinder, and I wrapped the thing up in silver bubble wrap. I covered it with the innards of some sofa cushions that somebody was thrown out, and then I stuffed fiberglass in all the other nooks and crannies, and yeah, I insulated it as much as it could possibly be insulated, and then lagged all the pipework on the feed, apart from the tiny bit you can see here. So all the hot water side of the system is well lagged and insulated in the loft space there. The return line is uninsulated because, again, it's the difference between the feed and the return that makes a thermosyphon system work. And the upshot of all that insulation, all that extra insulation, was that the tank went from losing about 10 degrees in heat in a 24-hour period to losing about 3 to 5 degrees of heat, very roughly in both cases, but a substantial difference. I've got a list of questions that people have asked me, so let's go inside and I'll work through those. A question that I keep getting a lot, or it's not really a question in a lot of cases, I'm just being told I should fit a pump to the system. I'll say again, that's missing the whole point of the experiment. What I'm trying to do is to make something that's thermosiphons by itself. That's that's the goal of everything that I'm doing here. I already had a central heating system that works purely off of gravity, no pump at all, and that worked really well, and I wanted to see if I could do the same with the hot water. So the whole idea of the system was to not have a pump. Some people have commented that I should have, instead of putting the panels like this in parallel and joining the outputs together and then going up the feed line, that I should have put them in serial, and then one panel would get hot and that would feed into the next panel. When you've only got two panels like I've got, that's not going to be of much benefit because there's only a finite amount of heat that each panel can give out. So whether they're like that or whether like that, the overall amount of heat is going to be the same. If I had all four panels to play with, and if I didn't have the windows in the wall, which would be an odd wall because that is the south facing, but if I had that configuration of four panels, then these ones here and here would be parallel to each other, but they'd be stacked in serial, and that would increase the flow and the heat and so forth. I've had a lot of people, this is an odd one, I've had a lot of people say that I should spray the panels, the interior of the panels black, which is one of the things I did in part one. In part one there is footage of me with a spray can of matte black spraying them, so maybe it's a fault of the camera that they're coming across as grey or whatever, but take my word for it, they are matte black. There's been quite a few suggestions about control systems that I might use, and I can see some benefit in that. If I want to get the temperature above the mid-40s, I have to actually shut off the panels for a bit, let the temperature of the panel build right up, and then open it and dump that heat into the heat exchanger. It would be very simple to have a valve that did that. Yeah, I'm not decided yet whether I'll actually do it. It's quite nice. I really do like the current setup that it's completely self-regulating. I've had someone say that using excess solar electric for immersion heating is inefficient. I don't really know what to say about that because it's highly efficient. If you think about it, the transfer of electrical power to heat in an immersion heater is pretty much 100% efficient. Possibly what he meant was that it's not economical if you're living on grid in a normal house to heat water with electricity. Perhaps that was what he was trying to say, but in terms of actual efficiency, it is an efficient process. So yeah. It just is. Lots of people ask me about the lagging the pipes, insulating the pipes, and further insulation on the tank, and I did both those things, and it did make a big difference. It not only helps keep the heat in the tank, but it helps the flow as well, because it keeps the hot side hotter, and leaving the cold side uninsulated has meant that the cold side is colder, and it's that difference that makes the thermosyphon work. So that was a really useful thing to do. I've had a few comments about the joints in the pipes, and that they should be gentle swept bends, and they are for almost entirely. When they come out of the panels, they come into a T-junction, and that's obviously a sharp 90 degrees, but they come from 15mm pipework in the solar panels and then into a 22, so that mitigates that somewhat. The only other sharp junction there is when it goes into the heat exchanger, and that was unavoidable. For the rest of it, it goes in a gentle bend into the sleeping loft, and then as it goes around a corner, it's just a bend just in that plastic pipe, so very smooth. And that is important for thermosyphon gravity-fed systems, to make the pipework as smooth flowing as possible, because you've got a very modest amount of flow there. There's not a pump to force things around like there is in a conventional system. Some people have stated that I would be better off with more pipe in the panels. Well, for one thing, I didn't make the panels, they came like that. I was just making use of what I had salvaged. For two, I don't think it would actually make any difference at all, because the pipes that are in the panels are set into copper sheet, and this is quite obvious. If you look at part one, it's quite clear to see that how they're actually put together. Copper sheet then is very conductive, and I think having that amount of copper sheet in there takes all that heat and sticks it into where it's needed, into that hot water that's in the pipes, and then it flows round. If you had more pipework squeezed in there, then you would just have more sharper bends for that flow to get round, and I think it would be detrimental to the overall efficiency of the system. I've had a few people say that the pipes are too small and that the thermosyphon won't work. Well, it does work, it works very well. The central heating system that I've got is all on 28mm pipe, but there you're dealing with a much greater amount of heat. It comes out of the wood burner much hotter than it does come out of the solar hot water panels, and there's just generally much more energy in the system that needs to flow around it. So having the radiators inside on 28mm I would say is essential, but for the hot water panels outside, I think the fact it goes from 15mm in the panels to 22 is useful. 22 seems adequate, perfectly adequate with the small amount of heat transfer that's going on. That's perfectly adequate to get it up, and then it's 28 on the drop, which is the important bit, because it's that cool water dropping that pushes it all round. So I think I'm happy with the pipe sizes as they are. Some people have said that I should make sure that I get the hot water up to about 60 or even 70 degrees every now and again to kill off any bugs that might be in the system. I can do that by using the hot water, solar hot water and the immersion heater together. I can get it up pretty hot. I could also light the wood burner if I wanted to, and I do that if I want to have, say, a bath or something like that and I need loads and loads of hot water. But in practice I tend to chlorinate the water quite regularly in the summertime, just to keep it fresh in the rainwater collection tanks. And then I rely on a special filter that takes that chlorine out again from the drinking water, but I leave the chlorine in. Any unreacted chlorine stays in that system for the rest of the system, and to my mind that's probably enough to keep it free of any bugs. As some people have pointed out, I do need to put antifreeze in there, and I'll be doing that very soon. Probably today or tomorrow actually. I'm going to put some glycol in the system. Remember that the solar hot water, as with the radiator central heating system, those hot water systems and the underfloor heating come to that. They are all completely separate to the hot water that comes out of hot water taps. Quite a lot of people say that I should put mirrors on the ground and or change the angle of the panels. I have explained in both previous episodes why the panels are at the angle that they're at. I'm going to leave them there. I'm quite happy with them as they are. Yes, if I hinge them in and out it would optimise them more, but as I say, I'm quite happy with them just as they are, and it enables me to drive past them without worrying. And by the same token, that's why I'm not going to put any mirrors on the ground. I don't feel the need to optimise the system anymore, and mirrors on the ground there would just be something else to drive into, and so that's not going to happen either. Right, that's about it. In conclusion then, I feel that the experiment has been a success. The idea was to see if I could make a completely passive thermosiphoning gravity flow solar hot water system and have it make some meaningful contribution to the hot water, and it worked. It's saved me having to light the wood burning range. I think I've lit it twice this summer. By way of contrast, last year I was having to light the wood burning range on average about every 3 days to keep up with the hot water demand, and that was lighting it with it all closed down with the radiators shut off, obviously just to heat the hot water. I haven't had to worry about that at all this year. I mean, granted we've had a heat wave, it's not always going to be like that, but I think even so even a normal summer, this in conjunction with that 700 watt immersion heater will provide enough hot water for all my needs. Once again then, if I was building the system from scratch and buying everything in new, I'd be inclined to just cover the roof in solar electric panels and use that via an immersion heater to provide for hot water. But for me, and the setup I have here, this system's really rather beneficial, and I'm very happy with it. I hope that's been of interest. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.